Hey everyone, this is Louis7 and today I have a quick guide in the Lord of the Rings Online focusing on the offensive stats. So today we will be comparing both physical and tactical mastery to critical rating and finesse. So the goal of this guide is to help you all learn which stat will be best for your character when you are looking to upgrade. And all of this can apply to any source of these stats. That will be things like from the primary stats like might, agility, and will, as well as armor and jewelry upgrades, the usual gear type stuff there, and then legendary relics, virtues, and anything really that gives you these offensive stats. So to begin, the best way to compare these stats is actually with percentages rather than with ratings. There are going to be some generalities that can be applied to the actual number of these stats, but what ultimately matters is going to be how the percentages change when you're looking to upgrade again. So when you are looking for armor upgrades and the such, I always recommend looking how your percentages change, and that is what I always do when I am looking at new gear for my character. I want to see how the percentages of these stats change. But for people not really wanting to go that much in depth with their armor, I will cover some generalities again with the ratings towards the end of this guide. But to go ahead and begin with the percentages, let's first compare critical chance and mastery. The general rule is that 1% critical chance is going to be better than 1% mastery. And this is mostly because of how critical magnitude, devastates, and crit synergy work in LOTRO. And it's very complicated actually. The calculation there's just many factors that depend on your class, your traits, and even the skills you are using, their damage type, and all sorts of things like that going on. So in this video, I will not be going into all those details so I can keep things straightforward. And just in most cases, I value 1% critical chance over 1% mastery. And the main exception to this is if you have low critical magnitude, as in somewhere around 20% or under. And then that's also especially true if your class or spec does not have much crit synergy, because that also comes into effect. And this exception I have found to be most common in the low levels, especially like level 20 and below. I looked at all of my characters, all my alts at these various level ranges, and looked at their critical magnitude, and it was especially my very low level characters. So by medium and high levels, usually 1% crit will be better than 1% mastery. But I do want to give some brief examples that I have, and first, on my Warden with her current gear and build setup, I would actually roughly equate 1% crit to 1.3% mastery. For my Guardian, it would be actually surprisingly a little bit higher with 1 crit to 1.5 mastery for me. That means that I would value 1% crit over 1.5% mastery, just as a reminder. And the way I determined these numbers was by looking at my average regular hit damage for my most used and strongest skills, and then I compared that to my average critical hit damage using the combat analysis plugin is how I tracked all of that. So if we go back to my Warden, how this worked was my crits were roughly 2.6 times the damage of my regular hits, meaning a 1% chance at that is the same as a flat 1.3% damage increase. So now that I have that information for my character, I can also factor in like devastates and potential crit synergy, again depending on the class, the traits, and all that sort of stuff. Then I would be able to determine that I value 1% in crit over 1.3% physical mastery for my Warden. So this same method can be applied to any class and situation, but I will say it requires quite a bit of effort. So one thing you might look for is some guides that already cover all this information for you, but one thing with LOTRO is it can be hard to find specific details like that in class guides in general, so I believe that it is going to be the best way for you to determine your exact weight in crit versus mastery, again with the whole combat analysis method there. I also should point out that some classes such as the Hunter and Champion who have strong crit synergies, as in like certain skills may have extra crit damage with them. The Hunter I know can generate focus with a certain trait in the red line I believe on crits, and the Champion can even bleed enemies on crits and I know they have huge crit magnitude with red line traits and the such, but those things are just other layers of complexity that you need to think about if you really want to min-max your benefit given your available resources. But typically if you're going to be min-maxing that far, you will probably be at endgame doing high tier stuff, and you will just be using best in slot armor and essences anyway to begin with, so it probably doesn't matter too much to think that much about it for those situations. But given again your available resources depending what you're doing, it is something to keep in mind, I believe. And that is all I do want to cover on critical chance, and the next stat we do have to cover is percent finesse, which is going to be a lot simpler. So with finesse, in most cases 1% in finesse will be better than 1% critical chance, and therefore also better than mastery, because crit chance is better than mastery in general. So the way to think about this is just that 1% finesse allows you to hit 1% more often, which is more effective than both a 1% crit chance and 1% flat damage boost for mastery. So there is a lot of information generally available on the internet about crit chance versus hit chance and increasing those, not just for LOTRO but applying to many other games, and it's a little bit complicated. You have to go through some tables as you increase both crit chance and hit chance and seeing which one is better to increase, but in general, increasing your finesse in LOTRO 1% finesse will be better than increasing your crit chance by 1% is ultimately what matters. Alright, so at this point we have our general percentage priorities, which is going to be finesse, followed by critical chance, then mastery. And this is when considering a percentage upgrade in each again. And again, just as a reminder, mastery does apply for both physical and tactical. Now, before we get into the number ratings, I do need to cover some stat caps, because for these three stats, there are going to be caps based on percentages here. And first, mastery and crit are very straightforward. Mastery just caps at 200% and critical chance caps at 25%. It is very important to note that anything that boosts your percentages on those will also increase the cap percent. That does mean, for example, a trait that gives plus 5% melee damage will boost the melee physical mastery cap to 205%. So there are a lot of traits and things like that in the game to look out for if you notice your percent is higher than 200%, for example. But anything that boosts the rating, the actual number like physical mastery number or critical rating number, cannot go above these caps. So percentage boosts will increase the cap, but ratings will not. And finally, we do have to cover finesse, which is going to be a little bit complicated because the hard cap is 50%. That is simple, but that is also going to be way more than you need in basically any scenario in the game. So the way finesse works is it reduces the chance an enemy will avoid you with a block, parry, evade, or resist your attack. So there are a lot of various sources around the internet that you may find, and a lot of information in them is quite inconsistent on what actual amount of finesse you need, and that is likely because of various amount of reasons like balance changes, there's differences in content, even just different content itself could be some of the reasons why information does not really match up between different guides and resources. So if you're looking to determine the finesse cap, the best way is actually to go through a method of slowly increasing your finesse until you are no longer resisted or BPE'd. And by the way, to point out for anybody unfamiliar, BPE is just the acronym for block, parry, and evade, so I don't have to say that, and it essentially means a physical avoid. But anyway, the method, again, is to slowly increase your finesse until you are no longer resisted or BPE'd. And for most landscape content, I would first recommend 25% as a starter amount, while low tier instances could need up to 30%, and then even higher tier instances in LOTRO with the new system with like tiers 4 and 5 and the such, those may require up to 40% finesse. Again, the way to determine exactly what you need for the content you are running is to slowly increase your finesse until you're just no longer resisted or BPE'd and you're landing all of your attacks. And one more thing I do want to point out with finesse, I already mentioned that it's better to prioritize that than other offensive stats when thinking with the percentages. But this is especially true for endgame content, as missing crucial skills can cause wipes and the such, which is really bad in raids and group content, of course. So I did just want to reiterate the importance of finesse, and making sure that you get enough for whatever content you need is very important. And also just a subjective note, actually, I just think it feels bad to miss attacks, so I'm a big fan of getting finesse up anyway, just for that. And it is often why I focus early on the wit virtue. But setting how the gameplay actually feels aside, I will say that depending on the need of your character, after getting finesse where you need, you can then focus on physical mastery or critical rating, just always keeping in mind the caps for all three of these stats. And the good news is at high levels with virtue traits and essences and all that, there is a lot of flexibility for you to outfit your character how you want and for whatever is best for whatever type of content you are running. But now that we have covered the percentages for these stats and their caps, what about ratings? And by ratings, I am thinking like a 1 point mastery increase versus a 1 point critical rating increase versus 1 point finesse increase, all that. This information is based on my in-game experience, and it's also corroborated by the LOTRO wiki stat curve graphs. So 1 mastery is going to be better than 1 finesse, which is better than 1 critical rating. So the priority stat-wise is mastery, followed by finesse, then critical rating. And this is actually the same method I used to develop my virtue trait priority, which should be in an upcoming video soon, I hope. And this is just something that came up often with low-level instances and crafted armor for me, and even determining some of my essence choices for some of my high-level characters when I didn't have just all the essences available that I would ideally want. So while percentage changes are what ultimately matter, I have found this method of 1 mastery being better than 1 finesse being better than 1 critical rating, that method to be helpful in situations to get a quick idea of what would be good for my character so I don't have to spend forever just looking at percentages, especially when thinking about essences. Definitely don't want to waste essences and that type of stuff. But yeah, again, with the point changes in these ratings, it is pretty simple overall. And moving on, one thing you may have noticed in this video is I did not cover much of anything with specific content, current endgame instances and raids, or anything like that. With this video, I was hoping to keep it general so you can use this information as it applies to whatever content you are running, whether it is just for like an armor upgrade while leveling, maybe crafting a new armor set for your character, or even determining, like I have mentioned, which essences work best for your character given your resources you have available. And you can even do it with virtues, which ones of those you want to prioritize, and maybe even start the process on like building out your end game gear for your character. But with that, I hope the guide has helped you all learn about these stats and how you can think about prioritizing them in the future to get the most out of your resources. If you did learn something useful or enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content, and thanks for watching everyone.